Cyberpunk is far more than a visual aesthetic of neon-drenched cityscapes in futuristic fashion. It's a profound literary and cultural mode that emerged in the latter half of the 20th century to grapple with the seismic fusion of technology, society, and the very definition of human identity. It represents, as one critic put it, the, quote, apotheosis of postmodernism, a paradoxical form of realism for an age of artificial eminence. To understand cyberpunk is to confront the anxieties of late-stage multinational capitalism and to explore the philosophical terrain of the dawning digital age. We'll do this in 4 movements. First, we'll define the genre itself, what makes something cyberpunk and not just science fiction. Second, we'll understand its postmodern philosophical roots, which will give us the critical vocabulary we need throughout this course. Third, we'll meet the cyberpunk protagonist and understand how they survive in this world. Finally, we'll explore why cyberpunk still matters as a lens for understanding our own increasingly digital reality. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify the core characteristics of cyberpunk and begin to recognize how this genre wrestles with questions of technology, humanity, and power that are more relevant now than ever. The term cyberpunk is a portmanteau, a concise and powerful fusion of 2 seemingly contradictory worlds. Understanding the name itself is the master key to understanding the genre because it suggests an unholy alliance between the technical world and the counterculture. Cyber represents cybernetics, the science of control and communication in animals and machines. It signifies a world saturated with high technology, artificial intelligence, bionic prosthetics, brain-computer interfaces, and vast global information networks. Cybernetics provides the pretext for the mechanized control of social life and the body itself. Think of it as the systematic logic of machines applied to human existence. Punk, conversely, represents the rebellious, anti-authoritarian, and alienated spirit of the counterculture. It is the modern pop underground, a world of street-level anarchy and what one critic called a, quote, self-mutilating refusal to dignify or trust anything that has brought about the present world. Punk rejects the system, questions authority, and survives on the margins. When you slam these 2 concepts together, the hyper-rational machine world and the chaotic street rebellion, you get the central tension that drives every cyberpunk narrative. This fusion of cyber and punk gives rise to the genre's central and most famous ethos, high-tech, low-life. This phrase describes a world where incredible technological advancements, neural implants, global communication networks, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering exist alongside profound social decay, urban blight, and staggering inequality. In these narratives, power has shifted away from traditional governments. The world is instead, quote, dominated by multinational corporations. Governments are weak or non-existent. Corporations own cities, control information, and treat human beings as resources to be optimized. The result is a grim landscape of wasted urban landscapes juxtaposed with elite luxury enclaves where marginalized individuals, hackers, smugglers, mercenaries, street operators, use and abuse technology just to survive another day. Technology doesn't liberate anyone in cyberpunk, it's just another tool in a rigged game. The collision between advanced technology and gritty human survival plays out in many fronts, but its most intimate and important battleground is the human body itself. In cyberpunk, the human body ceases to be a fixed biological given. As scholar Scott Buchotman explains, the body is no longer simply the repository of the soul. It has become a cyborg body, one element in an endless interface of biotechnologies. The body becomes, quote, a site of exploration and transfiguration, an obsessive reimagining that leads to a post-human condition where the boundaries of the self are radically redefined. The genre's exploration of this technologically saturated body can be understood through three primary insights. First, the body as an interface. The lines between organism and machine are intentionally and irrevocably blurred. The body becomes an apparatus to be modified, augmented, and connected to larger technological systems. It is a cyborg body whose very ontology, its state of being, is a hybrid of the biological and the mechanical. You don't just use technology, you become it. Second, vulnerability and violation. The same technology that can enhance or extend life can also be used to control, harm, or erase personal identity. Cyberpunk relentlessly explores the vulnerability of the flesh in a world where your brain can be hacked, your memories can be edited, and your body can be remotely controlled. Technology creates terrifying new methods for intruding on the body's integrity. Third, the body as a desiring machine. The genre shifts the central philosophical question about humanity. Traditional humanism asks, what does it mean to be human? Cyberpunk asks a more pragmatic, almost mechanical question. How does it work? In this framework, the body is a system of functions, drives, and circuits, a machine whose operations can be studied, hacked, and upgraded. Meaning gives way to function. This radical rethinking of the self and the physical form didn't emerge from a vacuum. To understand why cyberpunk looks at the body this way, we need to understand the philosophical movement that defined the late 20th century, postmodernism. Let me start with what cyberpunk is not. Cyberpunk is not a prediction. It's not about the year 2077 or 2100. It's not interested in mapping out a plausible future timeline. Instead, as critic Istvan Chicheri-Ronay argues, cyberpunk represents the collapse of the future on the present. It captures a moment when tomorrow crashed into today, when the technological future we were promised arrived, but broken, corrupted, and unevenly distributed. To understand this shift, think about the difference between classic science fiction and cyberpunk. Traditional science fiction was a telescope pointed at the stars. Think of the 1950s and 60s, Isaac Asimov's Foundations series, Star Trek, Arthur C. Clarke's visions of space stations and benevolent AI. This was expansive science fiction, outward-looking, optimistic, and imperial in scope. It was written by the intellectually dissatisfied, people yearning for a rational, ordered, better tomorrow. The heroes were explorers, scientists, and diplomats who sailed out into the cosmos to colonize new worlds and spread enlightenment. Cyberpunk is a microscope turned inward upon a microchip implanted in the brain. It is implosive, claustrophobic, cynical, and obsessed with dissolution. Critic Inge Erikson argues that cyberpunk offers, quote, populist dream visions, where the ties to history are severed. We aren't building a better world, we're trying to survive in the ruins of the one that already crashed. This is what makes cyberpunk quintessentially postmodern. It's an artistic expression of a culture that has lost faith in progress, grand narratives, and the idea that history is moving towards something better. Cyberpunk is saturated with postmodern philosophy. To analyze the texts we'll read this semester, you need to understand three key concepts. Don't worry if these feel dense right now. We'll see them play out in Neuromancer, Blade Runner, and everything else we encounter. First, pastiche. Pastiche is the neutral imitation of past styles. Critic Frederick Jameson calls it, quote, blank parody because it mimics dead forms without any satirical or humorous intent. It's not making fun of the past, it's just recycling it because nothing new feels possible anymore. This practice arises from a sense that true originality is dead after what postmodernists call, quote, the death of the subject. The idea that the individual creative voice has dissolved into a culture of infinite reproduction and simulation. As Jameson puts it, pastiche is, quote, speech in a dead language wearing a stylistic mask. This is why cyberpunk looks like 1940s film noir mixed with 1980s Tokyo mixed with Old West gunslinger aesthetics. It's not trying to be historically accurate or even internally consistent. It's a collage of dead styles, aesthetics ripped from their original contexts and jammed together because history itself has collapsed. Second, hyperreality. French theorist Jean Baudrillard defines hyperreality as a state in which simulation precedes and generates the real. It is, in his words, quote, a real without origin or reality, where the map comes before the territory. In the postmodern era, Baudrillard argues, we've experienced the, quote, liquidation of all referentials. The signs of the real are substituted for the real itself. We don't experience reality directly anymore. We experience models, simulations, projections, and representations. The hologram covering the decaying building becomes more real than the building. The financial algorithm becomes more real than the actual economy it claims to model. In cyberpunk, this isn't a metaphor. It's the literal environment the characters inhabit. When you jack into cyberspace in Neuromancer, the simulation isn't fake. It's the primary reality. The digital has become more substantial than the physical. Third, fragmented time and the perpetual present. Living in this hyper-real world of recycled styles fundamentally alters the human experience of time and identity. Jameson uses the term schizophrenia not as a clinical diagnosis, but as a powerful cultural descriptor for the postmodern experience. Before I explain the theory, let me give you a concrete example you'll recognize. Imagine scrolling through your phone right now. A news alert about a climate disaster, an ad for luxury watches, a meme about a TV show, a text from your mom, a video of a celebrity scandal, a notification about your bank account. Each moment is intense, vivid, and demands your attention now. But there's no coherent story linking them together, just a rapid-fire series of disconnected stimuli. You're not experiencing a narrative from a beginning, middle, and end. You're experiencing what Jameson calls, quote, a series of perpetual presence, isolated moments that light up your consciousness and then vanish, replaced by the next moment. Now here's the theory behind that experience. Jameson describes the cultural schizophrenia as a, quote, breakdown of the relationship between signifiers, the linguistic elements that constitute language and meaning. This breakdown shatters the chain of temporal continuity, the coherent link between past, present, and future that allows us to construct narratives about our lives. The result is the fragmentation of lived experience into, quote, a series of perpetual presence, where life is reduced to a sequence of isolated, disconnected moments. You can't plan for a meaningful future because the future never coheres. You can't learn from a meaningful past because the past is just a collection of aesthetic fragments. You can only survive the intensity of right now. This temporal fragmentation is the defining condition of the cyberpunk protagonist and the world they inhabit. With no grounding in meaningful history and an unstable personal identity, life becomes a matter of surviving the immediate moment. In a world where overarching values have collapsed and meta-narratives are dead, the only remaining standard is thrill, an intense nervous sensation powerful enough to, quote, light up the circuits and affirm your existence, however briefly. As critic Sherry Ronay observes, in this landscape of malaise and content, wearying drive, quote, human beings have nothing left but thrill. This is why cyberpunk protagonists move so fast, take so many drugs, chase so many highs, and throw themselves into danger. Reflection requires time and distance, but the implosion has destroyed distance. Speed is the only mode of survival. If the world has imploded, and if history is dead, and if time itself is fragmented, who are the people living in this nightmare? What kind of hero survives here? Critic Inga Eriksson offers us a crucial, although unfortunately gendered metaphor, the infantryman. Traditional literature and traditional science fiction often gives us the poet as a protagonist. The poet is an observer who stands back from events to extract meaning, to find truth with the capital T. The poet has perspective, distance, and the luxury of reflection. The cyberpunk hero is not a poet. They are, quote, an infantryman sloshing through Flemish mud in the trenches of World War I. They cannot see the whole battlefield. They don't understand the grand strategy. They don't care about the great truths or the meaning of it all. They care about bundles of energy and the bestial instinct of self-preservation. They are trying to make it to the next paycheck, the next fix, the next data run, the next moment of survival. How do you navigate through this world? Through speed. Cicerone argues that reflection requires time and distance, but implosion has destroyed both. The only way to survive is through thrill and speed. If you stop moving, if you stop to think too hard, you die, either literally or by getting crushed under the machinery of corporate control. This is why cyberpunk protagonists are hackers, couriers, smugglers, and hustlers. They live at the margins, moving fast through the cracks in the system. They're not trying to overthrow the system. They're just trying to not get rubbed out by it. We talked earlier about the body as an interface in cyberpunk. Now let's talk about what that means for how characters actually live. Scott Buchanan describes this as the condition of terminal flesh. The body becomes a landscape for exploration, modification, and ultimately obsolescence. The goal isn't to preserve your natural body, it's to merge it with the machine to upgrade it for better performance in an inhuman world. But Eriksson reminds us that the profound cynicism behind this transformation isn't spiritual transcendence. It's consumerism applied to the body itself. In cyberpunk, quote, love means less than an opportunity for cosmetic surgery. The body is a commodity to be upgraded like you'd upgrade your phone or your car. Meat, that's what the characters often call their unaugmented flesh, is just a vehicle, a platform for the mind to access the data stream. You don't upgrade your eyes to see beauty or to connect more deeply with other human beings. You upgrade your eyes to process data faster, to have an edge in a competitive market, to survive. The body becomes just another part of the economy. And like everything else in capitalism, it can be bought, sold, improved, discarded, and replaced. This brings us to an uncomfortable question. Is cyberpunk actually critiquing this nightmare world, or is it celebrating it? Cicerone points to what he calls the, quote, bad faith at the heart of the genre. The writers of cyberpunk, William Gibson, Bruce Sterling, and others, know that multinational capitalism is degrading. They know the system is oppressive, that the corporate control of human life is dystopian. They write worlds that are bleak, violent, and profoundly unjust. Yet they and we as readers and viewers are seduced by the sleaze and the hipness of it all. The neon is beautiful. The leather and chrome are cool. The hackers are badass. The genre doesn't offer a political solution. It doesn't imagine revolution or reform. It doesn't offer a utopia or even a path toward one. Instead, it offers a, quote, hotshot suicide into the machine, a stylish, thrilling plunge into the system, even as we recognize it's destroying us. As Eriksson summarizes, cyberpunk is, quote, a futuristic archaeology where, quote, ethics is aesthetics. The victory of the hero isn't saving the world or even saving themselves. The victory is navigating the neon reflections of the surface without being rubbed out. It's about looking cool while the world burns. This tension between critique and complicity, between horror and fascination, is part of what makes cyberpunk so compelling and so troubling. It forces us to ask, Are we analyzing the problem, or are we just enjoying the spectacle? I want to end by bringing this full circle to your world, to 2026, not some distant future. Cyberpunk is not merely a subgenre of science fiction from the 1980s. It is a vital artistic lens for interrogating our contemporary reality. Here's why it matters. First, its core theme of high-tech lowlife presciently captured the growing divide between technological progress and social equity. We live in a world of smartphones, AI, and genetic engineering, but also growing wealth inequality, crumbling infrastructure, and corporate power that rivals or exceeds government authority. Second, its radical exploration of the posthuman body speaks directly to our modern anxieties. We worry about genetic engineering, social media's effect on identity formation, digital surveillance, data privacy, and how much of our lives exist online versus in real life. When you scroll through Instagram curating a digital version of yourself, when you use filters that literally change your face, when you consider that your phone knows more about you than your friends do, you're living in the cyberpunk body problem. Third, its deep engagement with postmodern concepts makes it a crucial tool for understanding our hypermediated reality. We live in Baudrillard's simulation. We experience pastiche every time we watch a reboot or a retro aesthetic trend. We live in fragmented time, overwhelmed by the perpetual presence of social media feeds, news cycles, and algorithmic recommendations. Most importantly, cyberpunk forces us to confront the paradoxes of progress. Technology was supposed to liberate us. Instead, it often surveils us. Capitalism was supposed to create prosperity. Instead, it concentrates power. The internet was supposed to democratize information. Instead, it's controlled by a handful of corporations. Cyberpunk doesn't offer easy answers, but it gives us a vocabulary, a set of critical tools, and a genre of stories that help us think about these problems with clarity and honesty. Over the next several weeks, as we read Neuromancer, watch Blade Runner and Sleep Dealer, analyze Ghost in the Shell, and listen to Janelle Monáe's ArcAndroid, you'll develop the critical vocabulary to identify these characteristics in action. You'll analyze how different creators use the cyberpunk mode to explore what it means, or perhaps more accurately, how it works to be human in a post-human world. Remember that telescope versus microscope analogy. Traditional science fiction looked outward with hope. Cyberpunk looks inward with brutal honesty at what we're becoming. Your job in this course isn't just to enjoy the neon and this action. It's to use cyberpunk as a critical lens to examine the world we're actually living in. Because, as William Gibson famously said, quote, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." And that, more than anything else, is what cyberpunk has been trying to tell us all along.